SBC Media.
Welcome to the iGaming Daily podcast, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market.
Following 4 years of speculation, UK gambling appears to be exiting its period of purgatory as clarity begins to appear on its regulatory future. On today's iGaming Daily, we review a frantic week during which the government announced that £2 and £5 stake limits on slots will be applied from September onwards. Elsewhere, the Gambling Commission announced that it will begin its Affordability Checks pilot scheme as recommended in the Gambling Review's white paper. Yet, as UK gambling nears its spring resolutions, Parliament will debate demands to abandon those financial risk checks, which have been deemed untenable for UK racing and intrusive on recreational customers. I'm Martyn Elliott, and welcome to today's edition of iGaming Daily, brought to you in partnership with Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. 56% of the EGR Power 50 personalised player experiences with Optimove. And as a special offer, Optimove is offering new clients a free first month when they buy Optimove. For more information and to claim the free month, go to optimove.com/SBC. Now, joining me today to discuss the new stake limits and affordability checks is SBC's Content Director, Ted Menmuir. How are you doing, Ted?
Good, very well, very well. Very busy week last week, and glad to be talking about this.
Yeah, it's we spend a lot of time talking about proposed changes to regulation. Nice to change things with an actual change. A little bit of substance to talk about today.
Yeah, but I just say let's see.
Yeah,
because I mean, part of this is even as an editorial team, we start kind of gauging the response. It was only on Friday.
Yeah,
and there's been mixed reactions everywhere. I mean, what have you seen?
Well, I've seen a few things around, really. People seem quite sceptical that the new stake limit for slots, online slots, I should say, will be effective in terms of its sort of player protection message, which is being billed as. If I can quote Paul Buck, who is the founder of the gambling education consultancy, Epic Global Solutions. He sort of points out gambling not just a financial issue, and he says, that it's every bit as much about the time and the cognition and how much of each you use. And while the slot limit may reduce some harm, it may just serve to make people gamble for longer, which might have the complete opposite effect to what the government is hoping it will do. So that's not a particularly positive reaction, although there will be some people who welcome this, no doubt.
Mm-hmm. No, look, to put short, we've been told stake limits are coming in September. It's going to be £2 for players for player accounts from 18 to 24, and £5 for above. And yes, I mean, overall the script is there's no surprise in the decision, but yet there is kind of concern on kind of the long-term play and the long-term effect on UK gambling. And again, it's one of these scenarios where it's very much kind of find out and see, but no one's kind of happy on the application. I mean, even the response, like, yes, the betting and gaming council have accepted it, but it comes on that provision that they are, as stated by Michael Duga, that they can't just view gambling changes in isolation, and the government has to be aware of this.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. That I don't know if you saw the Regulus Partners update related to this, in which they go through the figures and they estimate total revenue risk of £730 million from these changes. And then they sort of pare it down and say some people will play for longer. So they think it might be a £460 million loss to the sector. And as they point out, and they use the currency of all public sector discussions, they point out that this is likely to mean £100 million in lost revenue to the government, which would pay for around 2,500 nurses, which is an interesting way to look at things. But I noticed that the DCMS has a different view on that figure. It's only talking about a loss of £166 million in terms of gross gambling yield. So that's quite a big differential between the two views.
I think one of the things that's been forgotten in this discussion, especially last week, is that the government, and especially I think this was highlighted by GambleAware, is that a lot of this was centered on how do you tame or how do you kind of reduce engagement with slots as the highest vertical. And it's actually as the growth vertical of UK gambling. So to a certain degree, do you think that has kind of been fulfilled by this? That it is kind of taming players, taming engagement with what is perceived to be the highest risk vertical of UK gambling?
I think it has the potential to do that for some players, but I think it will probably affect most the players who gamble within normal habits, normal sort of losses and so on. The people who are staking a lot of money and want to put on 20, 50, £100 a spin, whatever it is, and I don't really understand why anyone wants to do that, but obviously there are plenty of people out there doing it. They will go somewhere else, won't they? I know we get a little bit sick of having this black market argument, but what else are they going to do? They're not just going to pare down their game into £5 a spin, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, but part of the response, I mean, we get told that these cost and stake limits have already been applied by the big PLCs. So they've already done the year of revisions and they know what the going rate is now. I think, look, with any kind of regulation, there's always going to be a reaction to it. And you never know. I mean, this could foster new innovation in the slot markets and especially really now test the gambling companies' kind of talk or strategy with regards to catering for recreational players. And I think that's where the big challenge is going to be. It's how do you kind of cater online slots, which is the growth vertical, at a kind of real recreational level, and who are going to be the leaders in that? Sure.
I mean, that's where the big sort of 5, maybe 10 operators want to put their whole operation these days, though, isn't it? Whether that's betting or slots or live casino, whatever, they want those recreational lottery-style players who are betting small amounts regularly. I mean, to play devil's advocate a little bit with this, we're always told by the industry, slots and online casino, it's a form of entertainment. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme for punters. So if you follow that line of logic, limiting the stakes shouldn't make any difference to that entertainment. I'm not sure players would agree with that line of logic. Otherwise, they wouldn't be staking so much to start with. But how do you think this will play out for some of the smaller players in the market? There's specialists who are maybe some who rely almost entirely on slots for their revenue.
I've been thinking about this weekend, and obviously it's not good news for them. But again, I think that in the UK it replicates other markets now, where the days where you have, your big VIP customers who can then go and splurge within, a 24, 48 hour period are over. And I think, look, any what this is pointing towards now, and not only just on the stake limits, but also with affordability checks, right, is that you are now accountable for every pound wagered on your platform. And you have to be able to process it, you have to be able to report on it, and you have to be able to tell the regulator, look, I have done every check through my system to clean or to be aware of how this player has engaged with my offering. And that's a cost. I mean, that's a huge cost to take on. So, it's going to get tougher and tougher for the small guy and the mid-sized enterprises in UK gambling.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. They tighter regulation always benefits the big guys, ultimately, in terms of market share. But
I mean, look, the hardest thing about this process is how do you summarize it? And again, this is why I wanted much more of a chat than you bombarding me with questions. Because I think it comes around to, are we meant to be happy? Are we meant to, is this a resolution? Are we in a better place? And it's these are things that no one seems to want to answer.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not going to answer them because I don't know the answer to those questions, Ted. So
play devil's advocate.
Play devil's advocate. I think the government and the Gambling Commission would like it if we were all happy and satisfied, and so on. And the industry would like it if there was at least they could look at what the regulatory picture will be for the next 5 years, 10 years, and so on. Even if they don't particularly like what this the announcements coming out at the moment are. But I mean, I know this is always the bottling out answer, but you just have to wait and see how it plays out, really, to see whether these are good changes or not, I guess. What
we don't know is what were the actual factors and elements on that decision coming forth. And that will only be kind of disclosed when the white paper consultations are finally published. What was referenced, what was indexed by the UKGC, and because it can't just be on risk elements. I think we have to say, look, every stone was turned on this decision, and we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to go into a break in a minute, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about affordability checks, or I think financial risk checks we're meant to call them these days. Mm-hmm. But before we do, I just want to highlight a webinar that some of our colleagues on the Casino Beat Summit team are organising this coming Wednesday. It's called What's at Stake? Adapting to Lower Statutory Slots Limits. And it features guests from Kindred, Quiff and LNL Europe. And we'll be hearing some insights and opinions from the operators on the new limits. And we'll leave a link in the show notes to the details of how you can sign up for that. But with that, we'll sort of end this part of the discussion. And after the break, we'll come back and talk a little bit about affordability.
Brazil, a global economic powerhouse, deeply passionate about sports, and now home to one of the hottest markets in gaming. And we're giving it the full SBC treatment. Join industry leaders, market experts, and all the major players in the country for 3 days of content, exhibition, and epic networking at the first ever SBC Summit Rio. Okay, welcome back to part 2 of iGaming Daily, when we're going to be talking about affordability checks, as I mentioned earlier. Before we do that, though, Ted, did you see, and I'm sure you didn't, an article in The Sun written by Baron Herbert of South Downs on Saturday on the subject of affordability checks?
I did not. And
it doesn't surprise me that you weren't reading The Sun. It was just I noticed a couple of people discussing it on LinkedIn. It's quite something. So Baron Herbert of South Downs is Nick Herbert, the former sort of fairly centrist Tory MP who left Westminster in 2019 in that great exodus of the sensible from the Conservative Party. And he was writing in his role as chairman of the Countryside Alliance, so obviously racing a big thing, a huge industry for the countryside and the rural economy. So he accuses the government of developing a worrying new addiction, interfering unnecessarily with people's lives. And he goes on to say, already people who just want a small wager are facing intrusive demands to reveal their sources of wealth as though they were taking out a mortgage or buying a car on credit. It's extraordinary that a Conservative government should think it is right to target individuals and by force of law prohibit them from choosing how to spend their own money. Who will ministers pick on next? Will some people be told what types of food they are allowed to buy? And then he goes on just to make the case that affordability checks, as they've been outlined so far, they won't affect everybody equally. So it's a form of postcode lottery where your income group or neighbourhood could determine how your spending is controlled by the Gambling Commission. And then he goes on to say it's a blunt check and it's unnecessary. This unnecessary bureaucracy will do irreparable harm to the racing industry. So, how should I put it? He wasn't sitting on the fence. And although some of the language is quite eye-catching, I think he sort of tapped into a wider feeling in the racing world, hasn't he?
Yeah, and again, they put forward their petition to Parliament, 100,000 signatures. And they, UK racing has been at the forefront of challenging the UKGC on the implementation of affordability checks on UK customers, which they deem will cost them £100 million a year in lost income. But again, the UKGC outlined its schedule and its agenda to implement these restrictions in September, and it was very clear on its intentions to go ahead, and that it deems affordability checks as a preventative measure or a needed protection, especially for that target age of 18 to 24-year-olds. Which has been part of its mandate for the past 4 years. So it's that area of risk. It believes that affordability is needed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not somebody who naturally wants to see government restrictions and so on. And occasionally after a couple of drinks, the phrase "nanny state" may leave my lips, with which I should cure that habit. But I think that, in general terms, the Gambling Commission, the government, is right to want to protect those younger players. There's a wealth of medical research that says your brain isn't fully formed until you're 24, 25, and you take greater risks and so on at a young age. So I think that's perfectly sensible.
But is this the right way?
That's always the question, isn't it? And
then also, what would be the fallout of applying this and being too intrusive? Yes.
Yeah.
So again, you're going to go back to the black market. Now, I think here in this area of the review, you really are testing out the technical remit of the UK of the Gambling Commission as the governing body of UK gambling, and what it looks to implement and whether it can achieve that. But at the same time, it is they should be allowed to test and to carry out kind of their mandate and to proceed with kind of testing to see whether it's viable or not.
Sure. I mean, if I recall this correctly, I don't have the notes in front of me. They're talking about around, I think, about 3% of customers will be subject to the enhanced affordability checks, which they think will largely come through your credit reference file. and then a further 20% of customers will go through the light touch, frictionless affordability check. And the two levels of check will be triggered by a certain level of loss, which actually is not that high a level of loss either.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting to see, in particular, how the top level check works out. Because they say they can do this through credit reference agencies. Well, maybe. One or two people in the industry I've spoken to have expressed some doubts about the suitability of data from a credit reference file to govern non-regular spend and whether people can afford that. And the second bit is if they can't get it from credit reference agencies, they're going to either do a check via open banking or request the documents. That's the bit where it gets trickier, I think, because who essentially is still asking people to share their personal financial information with a gambling company. Why would you want to do that as a punter? True.
But I'd also kind of put back that what we haven't been able to do as an industry is actually clearly define to the UKGC and the government what we believe a recreational customer is and what their spend limit is. And again, you said for the higher tranche, it was very low, but low compared to what? Because again, we can't go back to saying, look, this is what we deemed kind of a VIP customer was 2 years ago, which the government were completely against.
Sure.
So again, it becomes kind of this battle of kind of defining things and presenting and saying, look, what are the terms of play, and what are the boundaries that are going to be examined?
Yeah, I mean the practical thing is for some people, losing £10 on a bet of the weekend is a disaster. For other people, losing £1,000 is something they're just a little bit ticked off about for 5 minutes, and that's where affordability is a really thorny issue. When you want to do it through a sort of automated one-size-fits-all system, I'm not entirely certain there is an answer to this that won't upset a percentage of customers. I think some people were just going to fall foul of it.
But say that high risk spend would have gone up to 5,000,
yeah,
or £10,000. I mean, can you imagine the media reaction to that?
Sure, and that's the thing. I mean, I described it as not particularly high, the level to trigger those checks, but for some people, losing, was it £900, something like that, over a period, or was it a bit lower than that?
1,000 to 2,000 is tier 2 threshold.
Yeah, that's a lot of money for a lot of people. So that actually, it probably is worth investigating at that point for a sizable proportion of the population. But for other people, they'd be sitting there saying, that's it's next to nothing. Why do I need to have this intrusion into my spending habits?
But I think, look, we're now reaching the academic and technical part of the consultation and the gambling review, and how that will be judged and what will be determined. And I think part of me thinks that we should have been, 2020, looking at stuff in hindsight. Yeah, you've always got perfect vision, but especially in this process, maybe we should have been better prepared to kind of engaged with the commission on these technical areas and the definition of what needs to be reviewed.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think some of the problems have been stored up by the industry has stored up for itself. So they, these questions were always going to be asked eventually. It'd be interesting to see some of the background and how they came up with this solution. So we know they've tried in other countries affordability checks, and there is huge evidence that people have just decided not to share their information and gone to the black market. And so players, in that scenario. So we'd like to see some evidence of what the Gambling Commission has considered and how they're going to stop the players leaving the regulated market.
One thing that the Gambling Commission has said is that they believe that one of the strengths of UK gambling is choice and the depth of the market. And, this is where they're going to be put to task. Now, so if it does affect consumer choice and it limits and people go to the black market, then okay, this is part of the review's remit in which they've failed.
Yeah. So
we'll see. But again, time will tell what if this works or not. And that's all that will be the criteria in which the review is judged.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing you touched on a little bit earlier, there's this Westminster Hall debate coming up, which the racing industry has managed to trigger. I think, is that today or is it later this week?
It's today.
Today. Mm-hmm. What can we expect from that? So just for listeners who might be outside the UK, this is not the same as it being discussed in the chamber of the House of Commons. It's got a different legal sort of status, hasn't it?
Yes, it will be directly the concerns put forward by UK racing and the impact. And look, I've got to actually credit UK racing because they're not just coming from it's going to hurt our revenues, but much more of you've got to understand our stakeholders and our value chain and the impact it has across the country and across the countryside, and the levels of employment, and it is a sector that is going through a forthcoming transition, and to take out that money, it really will impact. And the other thing is that it impacts MPs' constituencies. Yeah. So again, I think that it's not so much about what precedes the debate, but it's also what will be kind of put forward to the review, and what which stakeholders should be thought of in the following consultations.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see whether they propose a change to the racing levy as well, because that's something they've complained about a little bit. They don't think they're seeing their fair share of money from the gambling industry.
But look, again, it's year 4, and there's a parliamentary debate on affordability checks, but the impact of affordability checks on a vital sector outside of gaming. And I actually kind of believe that why couldn't we get this, or just better discussion here at a parliamentary stage across the key areas of conflict in the gambling review? Your sponsorship, your staking limits, your player rights, your gambling ombudsman. There just hasn't been any. And I think the other thing here now is that maybe it's like we're acknowledging that there are kind of wider voices in this debate that need to be heard. And it hasn't happened. And is this like another missed chance?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you about that, about the lack of joined up thinking in this whole process, in terms of, you shouldn't just consider the gambling industry in isolation. There's a lot of other stakeholders who will be affected by this change. In many ways, Ted, it's made me think you should be in charge of some of these things, that approach.
No.
Yeah, you think your current job is stressful enough. Can you imagine? I know sometimes we chat on here and say, why has the Gambling Commission done X, Y, and Z? But it must be an extremely difficult job for the guys in charge down there. So at the minute.
So, look, let's finish it off. What are your final thoughts following last week?
I I think it's nice to just actually see some firm action coming out of the last 4 years of debate and speculation and so on. I'm not entirely convinced these things are right, but I don't think they're so wrong that the industry can't work within them and find a way forward with it. So I'm not too downbeat about it. How about you?
It's hard to kind of draw any conclusions, but again, it's a key area of the process. They're taking a decision, and it's now up to the industry and how it reacts to it. And it's going to be another part of the process, but another part of a new challenge for gambling. And who knows? Because in 10 years' time, we're going to have another review, and will the industry be better prepared to fight that one and to present itself in a better light, or to be more clear in its strategy? And I think that's the big question.
Yeah, that's right. You would hope that they'll have learnt some lessons from this process. Anyway, but thanks for joining me today, Ted, and thanks to all of you for listening. And come back tomorrow when there'll be another episode of iGaming Daily.
Thank you for listening to today's iGaming Daily podcast, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News network, or check out the latest edition of the SBC Leaders magazine. Happy reading.